for today's show. I have to get started with some politics because I've had something on my mind that I've been holding in for the last few days or so, and I'm not going to hold it in anymore. It's specifically the presidential election, which is just over 2 weeks away. National polls show former President Donald Trump and Vice President Kamala Harris essentially in a dead heat heading towards November 5th. Both campaigns were on the trail over the last week or so, including this weekend, including some of their surrogates as well. And for Kamala Harris, that would include former President Barack Obama, who hit the trail stomping for Democrats. The former president made headlines this weekend, actually a few days before this weekend as well, speaking to a forum of black men in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Obama spoke directly to all men who may be considering not voting or voting for Donald Trump in this election cycle. Before I go any further, I want you to hear exactly what this man had to say.
I've got a problem with that because part of it makes me think, and I'm speaking to men directly now, part of it makes me think that, well, you just aren't feeling the idea of having a woman as president. And you're coming up with other alternatives and other reasons for that. And so now you're thinking about sitting out or even supporting somebody who has a history of denigrating you because you think that's a sign of strength, because that's what being a man is, putting women down. That's not acceptable.
Respectfully, President Obama, what you said is not acceptable. I'm going to say it again. Respectfully, what you said is not acceptable. Not to me, not to a host of black men out there who's not even thinking about voting for Donald Trump. What you said is unacceptable. I'll tell you why in a minute. But before I do that, I want to go to Khalil Thompson, co-founder and executive director of Win with Black Men, who responded to criticism of Obama's comments. Take a look at what he had to say here. Quote, I believe President Obama is speaking to a tangible, visceral understanding of what it means for all men to relate to women in America. Calling out misogyny is not wrong, end quote. To co-founder Khalil Thompson, you're wrong too. And what you said is unacceptable. You see, what you're missing is that you're basically accusing black men who come up with a reason to not support Kamala Harris as engaging in misogyny. Whatever happened to disagreeing without being disagreeable, President Obama? What happened to that? All of a sudden, we want to challenge men and our love and our affection as black men for black women. We want to bring that into question because we've got an election coming up and people may have the temerity to think differently than you. It's because she's a woman that she's in danger of losing this election? Didn't Hillary Clinton win the popular vote in 2016? Didn't she get over 2.8 million more votes than Donald Trump in the popular vote for the 2016 election? Last time I checked, she's a woman. Are we there sitting here and implying that black men would be more apropos to support a white woman than a black woman? Is that what we're saying? Is that what we're saying? It's a rhetorical question because it makes no sense to me. Before I go even further, let's hear more from Mr. Khalil Thompson himself. Quote, we're not a monolith. However, we are just like every other American in this country who wants a good paying job that we can provide for our children and participate in their lives and the lives of our partner. that we can get them home safely, afford to go to the grocery store, save a little for retirement, and have a vacation. There is absolutely nothing wrong with that explanation, Khalil Thompson. Why didn't you say that from the jump? What's up with the misogyny comments? I will have you know, and President Obama, our 44th president of the United States, who I voted for not once but twice, who was the president from 2009 to 2017, who to me was exemplary, who to me had the greatest first lady in the history of this country, who has been a phenomenal role model to black people and to black men and the men across this globe. That same Barack Obama, how could you say something like that? How could you ignore the facts that are lying in front of all of us? You don't want Trump to be president. We think that Trump could be an unmitigated disaster. In my opinion, he'll be on a revenge tour. In my opinion, there's a lot of things he bloviated about and didn't deliver on. We don't want to get into too much about COVID. We don't want to get into too much about him overblowing his contribution to HBCUs, the wall that he was going to build, and the Mexican was going to pay for it. He ended up building 2% of the wall, and the Mexicans didn't pay a dime. We could get into a whole bunch of stuff about him. That's a given. I understand that. But let's get back to the part about black men. That's what we're going to talk about right now. That's what we're going to talk about. President Obama, why didn't you tell the folks with the cameras rolling and the black men in attendance that there's been diminishing black voters, particularly black men, since you were in office? In 2008, 95% of the black populace voted for Barack Obama. It dipped in 2012 by about 6 to 8%. It dipped another 6% in 2016 when Hillary was running. It dipped even more in 2020 when Trump ran against Biden. It's been dipping since 2008. It didn't just start. Was that about misogyny? Was that about a hesitancy to support our women? I am getting sick and tired of black men being raked through the coals because of some imagery of not being supportive of black women. Do you know what most black men would do if they saw a black woman getting harmed in the streets? They put their lives on the line for that sister. We talked about the absence of black fathers in the past. What do we do simultaneously? We applaud the mothers who've uplifted us, who've nurtured us, who've made us into who we are. I can make an argument. No one loves women, particularly black women, more than black men. No one. You must know this. Black men support the Democratic Party more than everyone but black women. That means we support the Democratic Party more than white women, more than white men, more than Latino women, more than Latino men, more than Asian women, more than Asian men. Nobody, in terms of percentage, supports the Democratic Party more than black people. Black women first, black men second. Even as we sit here today, as Kamala Harris is neck and neck with Donald Trump, she's getting at least 80% of the black vote, according to the polls. And if there's a question mark about her, why don't we tell the truth? It may very well have nothing to do with her, per se, but what she has inherited. You have a president in Joe Biden who has his own history. Don't get me started with the crime bill of 1994. We want to bring up Trump in the 70s and rent control and all and denying rent to black folks. We don't want to bring up Biden and how he got along with segregationists in the 70s. We don't want to bring up how Kamala Harris, then a presidential candidate in 2020, called him out for his support of segregationists when it came to busing. We want to ignore that. You don't think black people heard that? You don't think there's some trepidation in the hearts and the minds of black people from time to time? At least from the past? Not even talking about what he's done during this administration, which some people will believe his policies and his heart have been in the right place in some of their eyes. You're President Obama. How do you ignore that? Inflation, the cost of living, the price of gas, the price of groceries. That don't matter? Folks ain't paying attention to that? Immigration and our borders. And this belief that there's an elevated level of sensitivity towards them, as opposed to black folks struggling, if not starving in this country. Yes, that plays a role too. I brought it up right here on this show. When the mayor of New York was talking about $53 million in prepaid credit cards for immigrants who came across our borders illegally and having prepaid credit cards for them. And I said, wait a minute, black folks been starving for years. We ain't get that. You don't think they notice? You don't think they notice? Is it possible that the only reason some black folks, not me, but some black folks may not be inclined to vote, or they may be a bit disenchanted, or dare I say may even be willing to go as far as voting for Trump? Is it possible that it's policy as opposed to misogyny? Is it possible that they've looked at a Democratic Party that is locked in on addressing or not addressing immigration and folks crossing the borders illegally, and have prioritized focusing on that, along with other issues, identity politics and beyond, that has become such a focal point that has turned off folks in the African American community? Some, not most, not all, just some. Is that possible? And is it possible that that is the reason why even Kamala Harris herself has become a bit more assertive in addressing the issue of immigration, in addressing the economy, in addressing a plan for Black America as it pertains to facilitating more business loans for minority ownership and things of that ilk? Is it possible that black folks, particularly black men, more so than the black women, who you look at Roe v. Wade and the women's rights and what have you in Trump's position, they're like, he's got no chance in hell of luring them in. But is it possible that when it comes to the men are saying, wait a minute, get all that, but what you gonna do for us? Could it be the issues as opposed to just misogyny? You know the answer to that question better than me, Barack Obama. The right may have a problem with you. Folks on the left, Democrats, progressives, you're revered. As a black man who is an independent, you are an incredible role model and somebody that I have admired for years. But to say that to black men, to attribute their hesitancy, their reluctance, their reticence to support Kamala Harris, to you just don't want to support a woman, really? Respectfully, sir, that's messed up. That's a messed up thing to accuse black men of. when you know good and damn well there are a plethora of reasons for us to point to than that to justify our apprehension. Doesn't mean you ain't gonna vote for her. Doesn't mean you don't want her to win. But my Lord, is it a crime to not be ultra excited when you see some of the choices that are before us and you see the decisions that have been made and the messages that have been disseminated? A black man asking, what about us, is not a crime. It's not misogyny. It's us exercising our rights as American citizens to question why you should have our support, which you yourself as the president for 8 years told us we had every right to do. That's all I'm going to say for now. Love me some Barack Obama. Always have, always will. Just very disappointed that you would say that to black men who are a bit apprehensive. I'm voting for Kamala, so you weren't talking to me. But still, it's not right for you to say that, sir. It's just wrong.